Shalom from Israel to all of the Daystar viewers around the world. I'm Moshe Bar Tzvi, the producer and founder of Israel Now News. We at Israel Now News are dedicated to bringing you the full story and the truth about Israel from Israel. It's written in the Holy Bible when David said in Psalm 25:5, "Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day long." And God says in Zechariah 8:16, "These are the things that you shall do. Speak out the truth to one another. Judge with truth and judgment to peace in your gates. And always search for the truth, and the truth shall set you free." John 8:31. I hope you enjoyed the program. God bless you from Jerusalem. Shalom, shalom.
Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner.
In our top story, IDF jets were back in action over Gaza after terrorists fired a Grad rocket toward the coastal city of Ashdod. There were no injuries caused by the missile. The Israeli Air Force targeted 4 buildings belonging to the Islamic Jihad and Hamas terrorist organizations. Hamas blamed Islamic Jihad for the attack, but Israeli officials have repeatedly warned that it holds the Hamas rulers of the enclave responsible for any terrorist activity coming out of Gaza. In other news, Islamic gunmen belonging to the ISIS terrorist organization have seized the ancient biblical city of Palmyra in central Syria. Human rights observers claim hundreds of civilians, including women and children, were massacred in the takeover. Some of the executions were done by shooting, others were beheaded. Many believe that King Solomon built the city, which was called Tadmor in Hebrew and Aramaic and Palmyra in Greek. It is mentioned in 2 Chronicles chapter 8, verse 2. Palmyra is a rich historical site, and archaeologists fear the Islamic fanatics of ISIS will destroy the antiquities as they did in Mosul in Iraq. Findings in Palmyra include vestiges of its Jewish past, among them the longest biblical Hebrew inscription from antiquity, the opening verses of the Shema carved into a stone doorway.
U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter blasted the Iraqi military following the fall of the strategic town of Ramadi to ISIS terrorists. Carter was blunt in his criticism, saying Iraqi forces lack the will to fight. The American defense chief complained that the Iraqi army vastly outnumbered the radical jihadi fighters, yet they still fled in disarray, leaving behind half a dozen tanks, as well as artillery pieces, armored personnel carriers, and 100 Humvee-type vehicles. It's believed that the abandoned military hardware is now in the hands of the ISIS terrorists. Carter's comments did not go unnoticed. The head of Iran's elite Revolutionary Guard, Qasem Soleimani, fired back, saying that the U.S. did not, quote, do a damn thing to stop the ISIS advance on the provincial Anbar capital, and that it was Washington that showed no will in it fighting the extremists. He added that Tehran and its allies are the only forces that can deal with ISIS.
Saudi King Salman has vowed to hunt down those behind a deadly suicide bombing at a Shiite mosque that left 21 people dead and wounded more than 80 others. A local terror cell with connections to the Sunni Islamic State group claimed responsibility for the attack. The Saudi monarch issued a statement saying that any participant, planner, supporter, or sympathizer of this heinous crime will be held accountable, tried, and will receive the punishment he deserves. Saudi security services said the bomber received his orders from ISIS and was a member of the same gang who murdered a Saudi soldier earlier this month.
According to a London-based Arabic language newspaper, Israel recently offered to supply Saudi Arabia with Iron Dome missile defense technology. The oil-rich kingdom rebuffed the gesture, however, for unspecified reasons. The government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu conveyed the proposal through American officials as a means of helping the Saudis to combat rocket attacks by Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in neighboring Yemen. Iron Dome proved to be highly successful in last summer's conflict with Hamas terrorists in Gaza. The state-of-the-art missile defense system intercepted 90% of the rockets that it targeted, saving thousands of lives.
The Hezbollah terror organization in Lebanon has boasted of its vast array of terror tunnels along Israel's northern border. The Iranian-backed group recently invited a Lebanese newspaper to view its network of tunnels for use in a future war with the Jewish state. According to the As-Safir newspaper, The group has built a sprawling underground complex of passageways, bunkers, and surveillance outposts. The tunnels are equipped with generators, a ventilation system, and secondary escape shafts in case of an attack. And they're stocked with tens of thousands of Iranian-supplied rockets ready for launching. The newspaper is a mouthpiece for the Shiite terror group, and the story could be a propaganda move to boost Hezbollah morale. The proxy army has suffered enormous casualties fighting in Syria with forces loyal to President Bashar al-Assad. However, an Israeli security official did reveal that some 200 villages in southern Lebanon have been turned into Hezbollah military strongholds. He warned that if rockets are fired at Israel from these buildings, they will be destroyed by the Israeli Air Force.
The U.S. State Department and the Pentagon have signed off on the sale of a massive tactical weapons package to Israel. The deal is worth nearly $1.9 billion and includes 3,000 Hellfire missiles, along with 50 super penetrator bombs and 700 bunker buster missiles. Some analysts believe that the timing of the sale, which still requires approval by Congress, is intended to alleviate Israeli concerns over a possible nuclear agreement between Washington and Tehran.
Meanwhile, Iran's deputy foreign minister has denied that his country has agreed to military site inspections as part of a nuclear deal with world powers. Abbas Araghchi stressed that he and Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif made it clear that Iran objects to inspections or visits to any military facilities or interviews with nuclear scientists. The Iranians insisted that it was a necessary step to prevent spying on the part of the West. Iran and the P5+1 nations, Britain, China, France, Russia, the United States, and Germany, have until June 30th to finalize a deal regarding the hardline Islamic Republic's rogue nuclear program.
The Middle East is growing more volatile every passing day. And with that in mind, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has appointed longtime confidant and advisor Dr. Dori Gold as Director General of the Foreign Ministry. Gold is an Arab affairs expert and previously served as Israel's ambassador to the United Nations. He currently heads the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. Dr. Gold, who will be working closely with Deputy Foreign Minister Tzipi Hotovely, said that he is keenly aware of the challenges facing Israel and will do his utmost to defend the interests of the state.
2 Israeli teenagers were stabbed outside Jerusalem's Old City. The attack occurred near the Damascus Gate. The 2 17-year-olds were rushed to Hadassah Hospital in Ein Kerem, where they were treated for moderate wounds. Police quickly apprehended the 19-year-old Arab terrorist, who was identified on security cameras. Authorities raided his home and recovered the knife used in the attack, along with other evidence connecting the suspect to the crime. And earlier, 2 border police officers were moderately injured in a vehicular attack. The 41-year-old Arab terrorist, identified as Amran Abu Daim, was shot and killed by other officers as he tried to back up his car and run over the victims again. The incident occurred at the intersection between Mount Scopus and the Mount of Olives. Local Arab residents threw stones at police and medical responders who were providing first aid at the scene.
Residents of Gaza have suffered under Hamas rule since the terror group ousted the Palestinian Authority in a bloody coup in the summer of 2007. Now, the Islamist rulers have placed yet another burden on their subjects by imposing a new import tax on items considered non-essential. The move has left local merchants up in arms. According to the media line, the tariff includes hundreds of products, including crops, meat, fruit, vegetables, clothing, and electronics. Angry businessmen are threatening to halt incoming shipments, most of which are from Egypt, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. Hamas officials admit that the majority of the tax revenues will go to support the terror group's 40,000 employees. Over the years, the radical Islamist group has diverted billions of dollars in aid from Europe and Arab countries to strengthen its terrorist infrastructure rather than for the benefit of average Gazans.
Israeli scientists have developed a new non-invasive test to detect colon cancer, which is the second most deadly form of the disease in the country and the third most common in the United States and Europe. The Medial CS company has come up with an algorithm capable of identifying symptoms of early-stage colon cancer, even among patients who had no other signs or clinical indicators of being sick. The new procedure is called Colon Score and only requires a simple blood test. The Health Ministry has already approved this life-saving technique, and approval by the European Union and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration is now pending. Ori Geva, the CEO of Medial CS, said the test is also being evaluated for use in detecting early signs of lung and other cancers.
And finally, the harrowing Holocaust drama Son of Saul claimed the Grand Prix Award at this year's Cannes Film Festival. The movie, directed by Laszlo Nemes, offers an unflinching depiction of the gas chambers of Auschwitz. The plot centers on a Hungarian Jewish prisoner named Saul Auslander, working as a Sonderkommando in the Nazi death camp, whose job it is to burn the dead. One day he finds the body of a boy and tries to rescue it from the flames of the crematorium, later seeking out a rabbi in order to arrange a clandestine burial. The drama plays out as other Sonderkommandos revolt and destroy the ovens after discovering that they too are about to be exterminated. All the while, Saul remains determined to pay the last honors to his son he could never take care of before. The film has been met with widespread acclaim, receiving 5 out of 5 stars. Critics describe it as a horror movie of extraordinary focus and courage, and declared it to be an astonishing directorial debut for Nemes. And that concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host Josh Reinstein, and we're here on a very hot, beautiful day in Jerusalem on our rooftop studio. My guest today is Dr. Martin Sherman, the Executive Director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies. Dr. Sherman, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Sherman, tell our viewers a little about what is the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies.
Well, the Institute is a newly established institute that is trying to establish a new paradigm for Israeli policy in general, and particularly the security and foreign policy, which we feel has been misdirected greatly over the last decades and dictated by political correctness, which has brought Israel into a perilous position, both in terms of its physical security and in terms of its delegitimization in the international arena. And I believe that counteracting this is an immediate imperative.
You know, I've been following your work for over a decade now. You're an author in the Jerusalem Post, you're a renowned lecturer, and you've always stayed to the point that the two-state solution is just geographically impossible. Yet today now we're hearing in our own government for the first time, people are starting to say, yeah, it doesn't really make that much sense. Why have you stuck to that opinion?
Well, I think anybody with a minimal understanding of the geographic and security parameters of Israel realizes that a two-state solution, a Palestinian state in the what's known as the West Bank or Judea and Samaria, will make Israel untenable, not only in terms of its military security, but in its ability to maintain a socio-economic routine in its most populated area in the coastal plain. You must understand that from the area designated for a Palestinian state, anyone there controls everything that goes on in Israel's urban metropolis. That means control of all its airfields, military and civilian, including its only international airport, seaports and naval bases, vital infrastructure systems and installations like electrical plants, water conveyance, etc., etc., and 80% of Israel's population and economic activity. All of this will be in range of weapons being used today from territory relinquished to the Palestinians and other Arab entities in the Middle East. So this can no longer be dismissed as right-wing scaremongering. This is precisely the empirical precedent.
You know, you also mentioned that because they have the higher ground in Judea and Samaria, they could actually infect our water supply as well. Why would Israeli politicians for now 2 decades even fathom this type of idea?
I have no idea, to tell you the truth, Joss. I've been fighting this concept now, as you mentioned, for decades. And I think in many ways this is a huge indictment of the way that the Israeli so-called right wing has conducted themselves. It's allowed the left wing to monopolize the agenda, propagate a false narrative, and put the country in really a perilous situation. And unless, I believe, an enterprise like mine manages to succeed, I think that the future holds very dire consequences for the country.
Well, we just had elections and Prime Minister Netanyahu came out and said he's now against a two-state solution. Is there an alternative?
Well, of course, I think there is an alternative, but I wouldn't place too much store on anything that any particular politician says, because Netanyahu was a great opponent of the Palestinian state, then embraced the Palestinian state, now seems to have backed away from it, and then apologized for doing it. So I wouldn't put great store on what the elected politicians say at any particular moment. But yes, there's an alternative. But in order to understand the necessity of an alternative which will allow Israel to endure as the nation state of the Jewish people, you must understand that to do so, Israel needs to contend with two imperatives: the geographic imperative and the demographic imperative. The two-state solution does not adequately address the geographic imperative because it will make Israel geographically untenable. And the one-state solution, suggested previously by the radical left and now by an increasing number of right-wing pundits, will make Israel demographically untenable, even if the optimistic demographers are right and Israel can maintain a Jewish majority. Because if you have a Muslim minority of 35%, to maintain the Jewish nature of the state will be almost impossible. So what you need is a paradigm that simultaneously addresses both Israel's geographic imperative and demographic imperative, which means Israel must hold all the territory it currently holds up to the Jordan Valley and institute policies that reduce the Arab presence west of the Jordan River, hopefully non-coercively. And in my opinion, the only way to do that non-coercively is by implementing economic incentives for Arab immigration. Now, I know people raise an eyebrow when I say this, but I believe that done in a thoughtful and rigorous fashion, it is very plausible and will result in a better future both for Jews and for Palestinians who for decades have been under the control of cruel, corrupt cliques that have led them astray and brought round after round of death and devastation on them.
Dr. Sherman, there are literally tens of millions of people watching the show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
Well, I think that the most important thing today is to delegitimize the paradigm of land for peace and completely take the issue of a two-state solution off the agenda and replace it with a viable alternative.
Thank you, Dr. Sherman, for being on the show, and thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, shining light from Israel.
These greenhouses grow tomatoes and basil, destined for markets around the globe. They hold the promise of a new Israeli invention that will save lives and money, especially in the Third World, as well as revolutionize the face of farming forever. Yaakov Nakash is a farmer in Sde Eliyahu, a kibbutz in northern Israel. His biggest enemies are the small insects that feed off his crops, a frustration he shares with farmers around the world. Each year, about 25% of the Earth's foods harvest are destroyed by bugs, which over the years have become resistant to many of the conventional chemical pesticides.
בחומרי הדברה יש לנו בעיות קשות מאוד בנושא השאריות. כשבודקים במעבדה פירות או ירקות, אז אנחנו מוצאים שאריות של רעלים.
But that's all set to change. Enter Yaniv Kidron, an Israeli engineer whose fascination with plants inspired him to search for one that could best help farmers save their crops and be safe for human consumption. 4 years ago, he found what he was looking for, a bush he won't name, but that's been growing in the Sinai Desert for thousands of years.
What we found, in effect, was compounds that produce a dominant odor signal to insects that masks or camouflages the plant, the crop odor to the insects. So it reduces the attraction of the insects to the crop.
The idea is simple enough. The plant acts as a nose plug, concealing the smell of plants and flowers, and possibly even people. It tricks the bugs into believing the crops are simply not there. It doesn't kill them, it just scares them away.
We've done large-scale studies with greenhouses, and they've shown that where the plant extract has been sprayed on the netting, there's a significant reduction in the number of thrips inside the greenhouse on the plants.
The plant's been used for centuries by Bedouins in tea as a way to counter inflammation, and so there's no question it's safe for human consumption.
אני מריע את החומר, המעבדה, אף שלי זה מעבדה, אני מריע את החומר אחרי יום, אחרי שבוע, אחרי חודש, ולא קורה לי כלום.
Leng came from Thailand to work in Israel 4 years ago. He's one of some 30,000 Thais toiling in the country's fields and greenhouses. He applied for a government work permit after hearing positive stories about the country and opportunities for foreign workers here.
ก็อยากให้คนที่อยู่ที่บ้านมาทำงานที่นี่ถ้าเข้ามาได้ก็ดีแต่ถ้ามาทำงานในคิบูนี่โอเคมื้อเช้าก็ดีแต่ตั้งใจเก็บเงินหน่อยจะไปเล่น
Leng too is excited about the plant. It makes his job easier and more productive, a huge bonus for the farming industry. In the coming months, the plant will go on the market, with orders already have been received from Holland, Spain, and the United States. After that, it'll be back to the lab to see if it can be sprayed on people to help protect them against malaria-carrying mosquitoes or bugs.
Please stay tuned for the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
In 1980, the Israeli parliament passed a law declaring a united Jerusalem as the eternal capital of the State of Israel. Threatened by the Arab League with an oil embargo, national embassies in Jerusalem closed their doors. That same year, Christians from around the world gathered in Jerusalem to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles. Sensing the isolation of the Israeli people, the participants and leaders of this gathering decided to establish the International Christian Embassy in Jerusalem.
The International Christian Embassy Jerusalem is since more than 30 years right here in Jerusalem to connect the global church with the nation of Israel. For many Jewish people throughout the centuries, the only face of Christianity, what they experienced, was the ugly face of anti-Semitism, of Christians persecuting the Jewish people wherever they found them. As Christian Embassy, we are here in Israel to show a new face of the church, a new face of Jesus Christ to the Jewish people. We are here to affirm to Israel and to the nation that God is a covenant-keeping God, that God is a God who didn't abandon His people, but that He is faithful to every single promise which He has made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
What an amazing thought, that when everyone was abandoning Israel, Christians stepped in and said, we will stand with Israel and we will have an embassy in Jerusalem.
Already for more than 30 years, the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem is reaching out all over the land, from the north to the south, from the east to the west, to reach those people that are in need. And these people are, of course, the Jewish people who live in this land. But we've also been reaching out to the Christian Arab, to the Muslims, to the Bedouin, and to the Druze that are part of the population of Israel.
Our vision is to build relationships, to foster reconciliation, and to reach out with God's love by responding to the social needs that come across our desk every single day. Through the projects that we do, we hope to provide a better future for the people of Israel and to reach out with hope to those who need it most.
With representation in more than 80 countries around the globe, the ICEJ is actively working to be the connection of the Christian church worldwide to Israel.
To say that we want to reach every country in the world, it's not just a saying, it's a mandate from God that we are to reach into every nation of the world, find those willing to represent their nation and stand with Israel in these days. It's prophetic, it's significant, and it's absolutely world-changing.
Through our publications, TV programs, digital media platforms, and annual events such as the celebration of the Feast of Tabernacles, we are providing resources and opportunity for the church to connect and engage in being an active part of what God is doing today in the nation of Israel.
You know, the truth is, the work of the ICJ is more important now than it's ever been. With Israel at the eye of the Middle East storm, we must stand with Israel and we must stand with the Jewish people to see God move in our generation right here in the land.
It's so important to educate the church regarding Israel from the Word of God and in the Bible. There's a lot of theory among the Christians speaking about Israel and a lot of opinions, but we do have to go to the Word of God with the revelation of the Holy Spirit actually, so the church can really understand that without the Jewish people and without Israel, there wouldn't be any church, there wouldn't be any Bible, there wouldn't be any salvation.
I want to personally invite you to find out more how you can connect yourself or your church with the nation of Israel. I look forward to hearing from you.
To learn more about how you can connect with what God is doing today in Israel, visit our website at www.icej.org.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.